Absolutely. Well, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. And I am affiliated with Singular. I am an affiliate because with all of my GLP patients, I put them on the clear protein. It's the only way to go.
That's awesome.
So, and in
Yeah.
the summertime, I just get tired of drinking the milky proteins. And when you're on a GLP, protein is so very important in order to maintain muscle mass. But let's talk a little bit about peptides and what peptides are, especially. I think there's a lot of misnomers out there about GLPs. I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been doing peptides, especially GLPs, probably before the Kardashians were doing them. I always joke and say that, but I started a couple different telehealth clinics. I currently own my own telehealth clinic, and it is all the craze. And congratulations to you, Robin, for being able to lose weight in a more, what we say, natural setting, even though you use some supplements and some gut health, because that's very, very important to do that. But let's face it, the majority of Americans, for whatever reason, and we're going to talk about those reasons here in just a second, but for whatever reason, they're extremely deficient in GLP. And GLP is something that, like I said, there's a lot of negative misnomers out there about, and a lot of kind of things that we've picked up off of social media or TikTok, or we've heard from the neighbor, or Sally down the street, has had a bad experience. And there's some really easy to understand reasons why sometimes these unfortunate events have been highlighted, because they're not the norm. So I think it's really important to understand, first and foremost, that our body is comprised of thousands of different peptides, and peptides are really nothing more than short chain amino acids or little protein molecules that form in various molecular structures throughout the body to do a host of different things, chemical, hormonal, and just cellular reactions. They're actually communication molecules that, kind of like the telephone game, it's like the string that connects the two cans together when we used to play telephone when we were little kids in the treehouse, and so we need that string in order to hear through the cans. And without that, or without the peptides, a lot of these reactions and different cellular functions in the body wouldn't be able to happen. And when it comes to weight loss, there's two very, very specific peptides that our body makes. And I want you to kind of ingrain that in your brain, because a lot of times we think of, because these are prescribed peptides, or people refer to them as medications, that it's some kind of an artificial, something that's very indifferent to your body, and something that your body might react negatively to. But really, this is nothing more than what your body normally makes in the small intestine. But for a lot of reasons, like I said, whether it's just your genetics, unfortunately, that can play a factor, and our age, those are the two things we can't really control, but stress. So, I always ask my patients, are you stressed? Do you have stress in your life? And I think I had one lady tell me at one point that she's never been stressed. And I asked her to check her pulse, because I'm like, I don't know anybody out there that doesn't have some kind of financial stress, social stress, physical stress on our bodies. I mean, for crying out loud, we just all made it through the pandemic, right? And so that was stressful physically. Some of us have suffered from COVID. Some of us have had injections. Some have just been forced to work from home. Our kids stayed home from school. So that was all stressful. So we all deal with stress, right? As we get older, our hormones start to change, men and women alike. We get a lot of, attention to menopause for women, but there is such a thing as mandropause, and men go through hormonal changes as they get older, too. So as our hormones start to change, even childbirth and things like that, our hormones start to change. And so those kind of things, lack of sleep plays a big part into our body's ability or inability to naturally produce peptides. And then I always say all the lotions, potions, and toxins that we've put on our body, including the shampoo and the conditioner we use, the body lotions, even the fabric softener sheets, all the way to all of the food that we eat that are full of toxins and artificial ingredients. And I don't know about you, but there's more ingredients in our food these days I can't pronounce than the ingredients that I can. So we're getting inundated, even just stepping outside, the environmental toxins that we're exposed to, all of these things and a host of other things as well really wreak havoc on our body's ability to naturally keep these peptide levels high. And when it comes to weight, when it comes to our body's ability to lose weight or maintain weight or maintain our metabolism, those two important peptides called GLP and GIP that we naturally form in the gut play a huge factor in our body's ability to naturally lose that weight. So as those peptides decline over time, when people struggle with trying to eat less and exercise more, which is unfortunately such a misnomer in mainstream medicine, it's an old theory that needs to be, flushed down the toilet, because let's just be honest, eating less is destroying our metabolism. So we've kind of done it to ourselves over the years when we've done these yo-yo diets and we've done these calorie deprivation diets. We've destroyed our metabolism, and then we're trying to exercise more, which when your body's stressed out and all of that, we're just creating all of this oxidative stress in our body. So we're increasing our inflammation. So it's just this cyclical cycle of events. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And until we replace that GLP and GIP back into the system, then really, honestly, very few people, and there are some people like Robin and some other people that have had some success with weight loss, but it's been hard, or they've used some supplements, or they've done some things to try to naturally bolster their GLP levels. And some people can do that and some people can. It just depends on kind of the level of deficiency in which we start at. Your deficiency is going to be different than mine, is going to be different than your brother. We're all very different in the level of deficiency. But until we replace that peptide, no matter what you do, it's very, very hard to lose weight, or you'll lose a few pounds and then you'll plateau at that 10, 15, 20 pound mark, and you just can't push past that. So I'm here to break a huge secret to you. We're talking about GLP and GIP. I'm here to tell you that is nothing more than semaglutide, which is just the GLP-1. But when you combine both of the incretin hormones, the GLP and the GIP, that comprises the peptide tirzepatide. Semaglutide is otherwise known as Ozempic, Wegovy, things of that nature, whereas tirzepatide is known as the newer generation, Mounjaro, Zepbound, and we even have another generation getting ready to release. It's called GLP-3. That will be retatrutide. For tonight's intensive purposes, we're just going to talk a little bit about semaglutide and tirzepatide. So with both of those injections, it really is up to the provider and sometimes the patient in what they're most looking for. I would say that as a provider who's treated thousands and thousands of patients, the majority of the people that I prescribe semaglutide to have a little bit more of the negative side effects, some mild nausea, some constipation, maybe some diarrhea, whereas tirzepatide, because it's a newer generation and the two peptides interacting together, they seem to kind of squander those side effects. So it's a much better tolerated peptide than compared to the semaglutide. It also has a much better weight loss percentage. I would say on average, most people lose about 15 to 20% on semaglutide of their BMIs. On tirzepatide, that's 20 to 25%. And again, on the newer iterations, it gets even higher than that. So what these two, for those of you who don't know, what these two different peptides are is, no matter if you pick the semaglutide or the tirzepatide, it's a once a week injection. We usually start with a small dose and we titrate up over time. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. Up to this point, a lot of providers have gone just by the standard titration schedule. So each month, for the first 4 weeks, you would take a said dose of either semaglutide or tirzepatide. Then on week 5 through 8, you would take the next highest level, and every 4 weeks you would increase in increments. This is where people have side effects because oftentimes they're being elevated way too much on the medication for what their body needs. I remember going back to everybody has a different level of GLP and GIP deficiency. So not everybody needs max dosing, but these lay providers that aren't specialized or trained in peptide therapy or GLP therapies a lot of times are over-prescribing. And so this is when our patients are getting symptoms. They're getting the nausea, they're getting the pancreatitis, they're getting the such GI upset that they can't tolerate the medicines. These are signs of overdose of the medication. So if you're hearing somebody say, oh my God, I took that for the first 4 weeks, or after the first 4 weeks, I got so sick when they elevated my dose, that usually tells me that their bodies weren't ready for that kind of a dose, and they should have been dosed at a smaller level. So a lot of providers are now going to a lot of different type of dosing regimens where it's very much to the patient. So a lot of times in my practice, we do what we call microdosing, which is a dose that's smaller than the starting dose that you do more than 2 times a week. So let's just say, for instance, the standard starting dose of tirzepatide is 2.5 milligrams. I would give somebody like 0.5 milligrams on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it's a much smaller dose than just doing that one dose all at once, and it's all that medicine up front. There's a lot of benefits to what we call split dosing, which is where you take the entire dose and you just split it into 2 injections about 3 to 4 days apart. There's a lot of benefits to split dosing. That's when we use that more for patients that maybe need that elevated dose to suppress their hunger throughout the week, to help them lose weight, continue to lose weight and not stall, but yet they can't handle that dose up front. So that would be when it's probably more appropriate for doing a split dose versus a microdose for somebody that maybe doesn't need to lose a lot of weight. Maybe that they want to take the GLPs for a lot of different reasons. And we haven't even gotten into, all of the other benefits outside of just weight loss. I mean, there are so many different studies out there that are talking about all of the amazing benefits of these GLPs. From cardioprotection, neuroprotection. It is a very, very potent anti-inflammatory. So this is why a lot of times you'll see people's faces shrink, and I hate the term Ozempic face, but when people start losing, kind of that inflammation in the face, and that's usually where we see it first. That is inflammation getting out of the body. And a lot of times when people have a really rapid weight loss at the beginning of a GLP, that tells me that their body was extremely inflamed to begin with. They're not losing 9 pounds of fat in the first week. They're losing a lot of inflammation. And so there's so much. I could talk on this for hours because it's very, very fascinating. In the GLP space, I think I read by 2035, they estimate that 70% of Americans will be on some form of a GLP, which is astronomical to me. I mean, we have such an epidemic of insulin resistance. And again, that always is coming from all of those things that I just talked about. But the primary source is our standard American diet, which is just chock full of sugar and carbohydrates and all of the bad things that give us that insulin resistance. So really insulin resistance, to kind of, back up just a little bit, insulin resistance is just our body's inability to respond adequately to insulin. So our pancreas has to produce more and more and more insulin every single day. Eventually what happens, not just weight gain, but insulin resistance is the root cause of whether you're 5 pounds or you're 500 pounds overweight. So if you're overweight, or somebody that's overweight, you're insulin resistant. That's just kind of the physiological and the biological facts of the case. But eventually, if you allow that insulin resistance to go on for longer and longer periods of time, that's when people's blood sugar starts to rise, and that's when they start to tip into that pre-diabetic or that type 2 diabetic stage. So really, in order to reverse that insulin resistance, again, we need to replace those peptides, and that's the way to do it. So there's so much more going on with GLPs other than just the number on the scale. There's a lot of incredible metabolic things that are of great benefit. And as you know, many of you probably know, the root of all disease is inflammation in the body. High blood pressure, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, other diseases in the body. It all stems from inflammation in the body. And when we are able to reduce that inflammation by calming the metabolic system down, by getting rid of the insulin resistance and things like that, we're able to mitigate disease in the body. So that's why there's a lot of studies that are showing people on GLPs have less incidence of heart attacks, less incidence of strokes. There's a new study out that is showing very promising signs of women that are on GLPs, less incidence of breast cancer. So we're going to continue as these studies are being taken care of or being looked at over longer periods of time. We're going to hear more and more and more good evidence for the use of GLPs outside of you just lose weight. So that's kind of I tried to keep it under 15 minutes, Robin. I'm sorry. I get really passionate and I start going down all these rabbit holes.
You do
but that's
fantastic.
Kind of, my elevator speech. So.
No, that's great. So you kind of touched on this, but I want to touch on it again because it's so important. Like, you know, this class of drugs, like your hunger, it is going to help eliminate some food noise. And you touched on in the beginning how you do recommend our clear protein. And I just wanted you to like elaborate like how much more it is important, because when you eliminate the food noise, you know, you're not going to want the sugar so much. And so you're not losing that muscle mass, why it is important. And that's what I really love about what's happening right now is like, for me, which I've been on more the natural side, you know, finally there's just always been this group that I could not help. And I'll give some examples, and it hurts my heart because I was 100 pounds overweight. I know how desperately it seems like pear shapes genetically are very hard to help lose weight. Obviously PCOS girls, because there's a lot of insulin resistance. I know I had that, you know, and I'm always going to have to watch that. My body's just predisposed to it. But when you do eliminate that food noise and you're not eating as much, like you did touch on, like why it's important to consume protein so you're not losing that muscle mass. Could you just touch on that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, our body really, again, we've really been miseducated, I guess I should say, on nutrition and what's important. And the food guide pyramid really should be tipped upside down, and that's how we should eat. And really, our body's preferred energy source is protein. And when we feed it protein, our body is able to keep our metabolic rate high. We're able to maintain our muscle mass. But this just goes to show you how important protein is when you don't hit that protein goal every day. And I always recommend 1 gram of protein per pound of body, like your goal weight. So if you pounds, but you want to get to 150 pounds, you need to be eating 150 grams of protein every single day. Because if you're not, your body is going to get it from somewhere, and it's going to start cannibalizing or eating its own muscle in order to nourish itself with the protein that your body needs. So it is extremely important. And anytime I see people that are on a weight loss journey that stall, that is the very, very, very first question that I ask them is, how much protein are you getting? Because inevitably, you know, when people start eating less and less and less, again, like Robin said, this medicine also, one of the side effects, it's a positive side effect, but one of the side effects is that leptin-like secretagogues, meaning leptin is the hormone of our stomach that is our satiety hormone. So when we start to eat and our stomach starts to expand on Thanksgiving Day, pretty soon when we get really full, that's when we're like, oh my gosh, that's what signals our brain that we've overeaten and we can't even think about food for the rest of the day. Well, when we give these GLPs and the GLP medications, they're leptin-like secretagogues, and so they trick our brain to make them think that we've really filled up our stomach very fast, but it really happens within 4 or 5 bites of eat food. So our brains don't think we're hungry, so we have to stress all the time to eat protein or get protein in. But when people are full, that's the last thing they want to sit down and eat, a heavy meal of protein. So this clear protein has been such a beautiful marriage with our GLP patients because it's light, It tastes good. It's not that heavy, milky taste, and it doesn't leave your tummy feeling like full and bloated and just kind of icky like you would if you would eat a big T-bone steak or what have you. So very, very important in the GLP process. Also supplementation, and you guys have such an amazing supplement line. Supplementation is so important too. People oftentimes, because they're not eating enough, are definitely not getting enough nutritional supplements from whole foods. And so we need to supplement, and we don't get enough supplements in with foods just eating regularly the way it is, but we start suppressing people's appetite and we're really deficient in those. So you guys have a lot of amazing products. Now, I just wanted to take 2 seconds and comment on something that you said, Robin, about, there was a lot of people like the pear-shaped women, the PCOS women. Our weight and our metabolism go hand in hand with the endocrine system. This is a direct impact on the endocrine system. And so many people that have hormonal issues and that have things COS or have other, disrupted hormones, it's because their metabolic system is at dis-ease. There is an unease about the metabolic system. And so when we start to get the metabolic system back in order by lowering the insulin resistance, lessening the inflammation that we have in our body, hormone reactions or hormone imbalances start to settle out. And we've had in our clinic, we've had tons of GLP babies, of women that have been told they would never, and pretty soon they're calling me up in tears telling me they're pregnant. We've had several women that have, horrible menstrual cycles and things like that. People that have had migraine headaches because of menstrual, hormonal issues and things like that. And a lot of those things start settling down. Now, of course, we can't make medical claims as in the industry. As a practitioner, I can talk about things like that, but just be careful making medical claims. But I want you to know that does happen on a daily basis. We start to see mitigation of some of those issues that people have been plagued with for years.